SperoDedes.com/stay connected. I'm Mark Renee.
We like you.
You like us.
Why not friend us on Facebook?
I love ya.
Visit Facebook.com/CB.
The only way you can take CBS Sports Radio 1140 with you is with the radio.com app. Download it today and listen to us anytime, anywhere. We've got your Raiders covered.
Knock on wood if you're with me.
It's Silver and Black today on CBS Sports Radio 1140. And now, here's your host, Scott Gulbransen.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Silver and Black today here on CBS Sports Radio 1140, emanating from Las Vegas, Nevada. Hope you all are doing well out there as the self-imposed or somewhat self-imposed. Now they're kind of telling us we got to stay home, but you can't really force us to, but we're all doing the right thing, right? We're all staying home and trying to put a damper on this thing so we can get back to life as it was. But we thank you guys for being here. A little respite, talk a little Raider football, and forget about everything else for a little while. And we hope we can help you do that as we get set for, excuse me for that, we get set for some Raider talk. Big full show today. Just off the top, just want to give you a rundown of who's going to be on the show, what we're going to talk about. In the first hour, Willie Ramirez, W.G. Ramirez, a AP sports writer here in Las Vegas. We're going to talk to him. You guys may have noticed, sports isn't happening at all. The NFL is kind of functioning, but the rest of the sports, there is nothing to watch. There is nothing to talk about. And that has had a profound impact on all of us who cover sports. Including sports writers. Willie's a AP sports writer here in town. He covers the Golden Knights. He covers UNLV. He covers a bunch of different stuff. He's also a native Las Vegan. It's impacted the people that you read every day on sports because most of them are freelancers. They are not somebody who works full-time for that organization. And so when sports stopped, so did their income and their assignments. So we're going to talk to him about that. Then at the bottom of the hour, Evan Groat from Just Pod Baby, as if you may have seen up on the website, silverandblacktoday.com. The Just Pod Baby, he hosts that podcast, very popular podcast, longtime podcast. He is now a part of the Silver and Black Today media group. He is a member of the family. We're going to have him talk a lot about defense and free agency, how it impacts the draft strategy. We'll get his take from someone who has followed the team for a long, long time. We'll talk a little bit of Raiders news, including their big donation in Nevada here, Rodney Hudson contract restructure. And will they draft a cornerback in the first round? We'll talk about that. Second hour, Scott Bair, longtime Raiders reporter with NBCSN Bay Area. He'll be with us. We'll talk about him, the expanded playoffs under the CBA. What would that mean for the Raiders? Also, they add Demarius Randall to an already impressive free agent class on defense. How would he evaluate how they've done thus far addressing the holes in the defense? And we'll talk to him about the draft as well. Always great insight from Scott, who's working hard all the time. Then at 9:15, Spero Dedes, one of the great young broadcasters in the sports world, of course, has been play-by-play for the Lakers, for the Knicks, and does NFL on CBS now. We'll talk to him about the current state of the NFL. What does his gut tell him about the 2020 season? We'll also ask him about the AFC West. He does some Charger games during the preseason. We'll ask him about that and where the Raiders are in the AFC West as the Chiefs continue to keep the band together. We'll also talk about the league coming to Las Vegas and what he thinks of that and what it means overall for professional football and for the league. And then, of course, Kelly's Corner. We got to wake him up, but hopefully he'll be ready for that. And as always, I bring in my co-hosts, Mr. Chaz, Osborne, and Kelly Kriner. How you guys doing? Hold up at home.
I'm doing good, man. How you guys doing?
Doing great. Good to be here, man. Sunday, talking Raiders football, my favorite thing.
Yeah, it's still. There was a couple moments this week where I was like, man, this is killing me. I wish I could be out somewhere. And luckily I had to, either go to the pharmacy or something to pick up something for home. But that was it. And it's something that we just are dealing with, but a lot of things happened. And this week and yesterday, the president had a call with all of the heads of the different leagues, the commissioners of the NHL, NFL, NBA, and so on, MSL. And it's interesting, guys, because I just want to get your take on what you think is going to happen, because I've floated out there. I could see without much harm, the NFL delaying the season by a half a month or 30 days if they had to. But of course, we heard the president say he was hopeful that the teams would get back and the NFL would start its season on time. But then we see the story from the NFL's chief medical officer, Dr. Alan Sills, who's kind of spearheading the league's response to the pandemic. And he said that he wasn't sure that the timing fits really well, and that as long as we are still in place when we have a single individual test positive for virus, that you have to quarantine every single person who's in contact with them. So meaning that you could go back, you could start training camp, and if one guy on one team tests positive, then that whole team and everyone associated with it now has to be on quarantine. So then you lose all that. So guys, I just want to hear what your perspective is on what does your gut tell you on how this is all going to work out?
Well, we talked about it the other day on the podcast. It's like, he just said it right there. If one person tests positive, now that football team can't play for 2 weeks. So you can't start the season until this is under control. But I got bad news for people. This won't be under control for a long time, to the point where you could do something like that. I don't see any way the season starts on time, and won't be surprised if the season doesn't start, if at all, this season.
Wow.
Yeah. Well, I'm kind of with him. It'd be irresponsible to put any kind of number or date on anything right now. You just, as always, information is a valuable commodity, and we just don't have enough information about, everything that's going on. And we just have to trust the experts and go along with what they're saying. And hopefully it's sooner than later, but you've always got to err on the side of caution for sure.
Yeah, no, I mean, human life comes first. I don't care. Again, sports is an important thing for all of us. It's an important part of our life. I mean, we're working in it, but for those who just watch it, fans, it's a big deal. But I think it's too early. I think what we do, and maybe me even asking the question, is a little bit of sensationalizing it, because I think that it's too early to tell. I think what we're doing now to mitigate it could over time very well get this thing to a point where we can start to slowly return back to what we were doing. And so we'll see, though. I mean, I look at the experts, and they don't always know either. So we're all just kind of taking shots in the dark, but I think you have to take this a couple weeks at a time. So if we go a couple weeks now, we've been told here in the state of Nevada, it's that everything's shut down until the end of the month. At first it was the middle of the month, now it's the end of the month. And so that seems to have worked in Nevada, because our numbers, relatively speaking, and again, with all due respect to those who lost folks to this terrible disease, our condolences to them. But relatively speaking to other parts of the country, we have remained pretty low here in Nevada. And I have to credit the governor with shutting down casinos and whatnot, because had he not done that, who knows what could have happened.
Yeah, it really could have gotten big.
Yeah. So I think with the NFL, I mean, I think there will be a football season. I don't necessarily agree with you guys on that one. I know I'm taking the optimistic approach here, but I think if you get this thing to the point where we're starting to see the right trend in the right direction, then starting the season the beginning of October or late September doesn't seem out of the question. But again, we're just guessing, and until we see numbers, until we see things happening over the course of the next several weeks as we get through April particularly, then I think that'll give us a better sense. Now, what is going on, and they're talking about how they're going to pull it off, is the draft, and they're going to apparently have everybody do it from home, which brings up some interesting question, guys, because to me, I don't see the big deal. I don't know why people throw a fit that the NFL would do their draft. A lot of us are working at home during the week. Right? We're still working. Not every business and every person in the entire country is not working and shut down. You still have to keep going, right? As long as you're doing what we've been told to do to protect others and to protect ourselves. So do you guys see any issue with this other than the logistics for the teams?
The biggest issue, like you just mentioned it right there, usually when you see the war room, there's 20 guys or whatever in there. You only need 3 or 4. But you also have to be able, if you've got a trade or anything, you've got to be able to contact that team. You got to be able to contact the league office. It's like, say you're working from home. If you've got 4 or 5 screens that you're working off of and trying to do all that other stuff, say your internet goes out at your house. Say something happens there, and then you're just out.
Yeah.
I mean, it sounds kind of dumb, but that could happen.
Yeah, the one thing that we used to do in the NBA, we would come in 10 days, 2 weeks before the draft to start having our meetings, ramping up towards that draft night. But during that time, we would still have players coming in for workouts, taking medicals. We were still doing all the medicals on all the testing from the combine and all those other things. So that is really going to be a huge hindrance for all these teams. And you saw it already, with the Eli Apple. You can't get him in for a physical, and he's not getting a physical from somebody else. So that's really, I think it's going to have a profound effect on the draft this year. But going forward with the draft, I don't see any problem with it. I heard that they invited 50 players to participate in the draft, like through a virtual thing, like what we're doing now. So I think they can do the whole thing, come off without a hitch. But as far as knowing the ins and outs of every player, there's still a lot of question with Tua and other players like that. So to do your due diligence is extremely difficult in these times.
Yeah, and it's interesting. Our viewer Raider Brandon on YouTube says that he is seeing a report that EA Sports, the video game company, is going to do virtual images of the picks going to the podium, which is kind of cool. I mean, at least it gives a visual. But I think, guys, before we step aside for our first break here, what I think, though, this situation and this extraordinary circumstance, and you bring up some really good points, Chaz, about how they're going to connect and Kelly, you too, about if internet goes out and all that. We'll have to see what they build in, safeguards or something like that, because you can always pick up a phone, I guess, and call it in like the old days. But to me, you're going to learn what organizations have their crap together during something like this, because the more prepared an organization, I mean, nobody could be prepared for what's happened, right? But the more prepared, the more together, the more organized an organization is, I think you'll see those guys will have less of a disruption and less of trouble in executing their plan and carrying out the draft that they wanted to, versus those that don't necessarily have an organization that lends itself to that. All right, we are up on our first break. When we come back from this, we're going to talk with Willie Ramirez, AP sports writer, about how freelance writers, they're out in the cold during COVID-19. You're listening to the Silver and Black today here on CBS Sports Radio 1140.
Hey, everyone, it's the Playmakers.
with you until we get back on track. So when you need company, join us on air at CBS Sports Radio 1140 and listen everywhere with your free radio.com app and smart speaker. CBS Sports Radio 1140 is helping Southern Nevada stay connected. For more, go to radio.com/stay connected.
CBS Sports Radio. This is Silver and Black Today, live on CBS Sports Radio 1140.
Welcome back to the Silver and Black Today here on CBS Sports Radio 1140 in Las Vegas. Hope you're doing well, holding up. Probably on Amazon ordering more board games or video games, something to keep you busy. But we're going to keep you busy. We're talking sports.
Hey, we're rude.
And I know
we can save you 52% off your car insurance rate. Download the app.
Something's going on.
For a ride today.
We're hearing something. But anyway, we're back. We're broadcasting from our bunkers. That's right. We're broadcasting from home on Las Vegas's only All Raiders talk show. And in this portion of the show, we wanted to bring in a good friend, a good local friend, W.G. Ramirez. We call him Willie. Willie is a reporter for AP Sports, Associated Press. And what you guys might not all realize is a lot of the writers that you read across the country that cover sports that we love, that we usually watch, they're not full-time employees. They are freelancers. So they get paid by the story or by the assignment. And so as sports was shut down, all of these talented individuals, these men and women who bring us the stories, bring us the highlights through the written word, they're left out in the cold. They don't have income. And so we wanted to bring on Willie because Willie, not only have I known him for a long time, we both had a lot more hair and were much younger back then, but I wanted to bring him on and talk about that. How you doing today, Willie?
Doing good. I'm awake. The sun is up. And now it's the countdown until the sun goes down so I can go back to bed.
I hear you, man. I've been there. Exactly. Especially being at home with the younger kids as well. You're like, okay, is it bedtime yet? as much as I love being around them. But Willie, there was a story that ran out in Michigan, and it's been kind of crawling its way all the way across country, which you are highlighted in, and it was about all of this happening because you cover the Golden Knights. You're there every game covering the team, as well as covering other things like UNLV sports and basketball, all kinds of sports that you cover. But the AP Michigan-based writer Larry Lage started a fund because you had a conversation with him and said, hey, man, it's tough for us now because there's no income coming in now that everything's stopped. Talk a little bit about the challenges and what people might not understand about sports writing and how most folks are freelancers.
Well, as far as the fundraiser is concerned, what had happened was I got a text message out of nowhere when all sports were brought to a halt. My biggest vendor is a sports betting firm, a sports advisory firm in which I type sports betting analysis for games that are going to be played, and that's something I've done basically for the better part of the last 18 years. And as you know, Scott, there's only 3-4 days of the year that you cannot bet on major sports, the day before and the few days after the Major League All-Star game. So when sports shuts down, 90% of my income goes away. The Associated Press, as far as covering the Golden Knights, UNLV, NBA Summer League, anything that comes to Las Vegas, that's a steady stream of extra income. So essentially everything just went away. And I had tweeted something out, just in regards to sports shuts down, freelancers, so on and so forth. And Larry texted me and reached out to me, and he just said, hey, what's your account name on? And he started naming all the different third-party apps, Cash App, Venmo, so on and so forth. And he said, I have a gift coming from you. I said, wait, what? What's going on? And he said, I have a fundraiser going on Facebook. I said, wow, I'm not even on Facebook anymore. And he explained how he put this fundraiser together for freelancers. And he said, it's not going to be a lot. It could be $20, could be $50. I'm not sure, but anything could help. I said, absolutely. And a few days later, I got a Cash App for $50, and the next day another $50. So little things like that they're going to help obviously with runs to the grocery store, and with Larry, because of his background and the number of people in a big metropolis like Detroit, several big people got wind of it. I know Woj from ESPN, Jamel Hill, Dickie V the other day. They saw it and they tweeted out the fundraiser. So he went from like trying to get $7,000-8,000 in a fundraiser to maybe benefit 25 people to nearly $20,000 so far to benefit nearly 100 freelancers. And the greatest thing about this is that he's asked a lot of us to give him names of other freelancers that have been stuck without work. So it's sort of paid forward 3-4 freelancers removed from the original connection that Larry made with people he knew. So he's sending money to people that he doesn't even know, which is the greatest thing. And I mean, again, nobody's going to have their finances resolved. Nobody's going to have their mortgage payment made. Nobody's going to have their rent paid. Nobody's going to have their car note made, that I would think. But what they are going to have is somewhat of a little bit of an insurance policy for a grocery store run, or maybe a bill, maybe a small utility bill, whatever it is. It's somewhat of a little bit of hope based on a little bit of kindness that right now we need to see.
Yeah,
and that's just that was huge.
Yeah, and Willie, again, we're talking to W.G Ramirez, AP sports writer, freelance writer as well, based here in Las Vegas. And Willie, I think that's the thing is you're right. It's every little bit helps. Nobody expects everything to be resolved because you can't replace an income, with a fundraiser like this. But Larry did an amazing thing, and there's so many folks because of the way the media has changed, and because of the rise of independent media and things like that. Most people aren't aware that all of you don't work primarily in one spot, that you have multiple sources of income. I think more people are getting familiar with that because it's actually happening in more industries, but in the media, it's very prevalent. And when you look at this, and for you, you were always busy, and if you follow Willie on any of the social media channels, you'll see on Twitter and Instagram, you'll see how busy he was. I mean, he was always doing something here in Las Vegas, covering something. And so for you too, not being able to be out there and kind of practicing your craft, that's got to be tough for you as well, is it not?
It is. You kind of go stir crazy because, what's crazy is Thanksgiving night, I was sick, and I went to a local ER just to make sure everything was cool because I've had a history of pneumonia, and I was coughing, and she said, well, just in case with your past and your upper respiratory infection, history, I'm going to prescribe you this, so on and so forth. Well, every March, I know it's March because I always picture the Mountain West tournament and me leaving there coughing. The allergies in Las Vegas are brutal.
Yes.
So we had somewhat of a warmer winter, and there was a week or two in January where we hit 70s. Pollen started, flowers were blooming. So this cough has just sat there. And so I had to – so just out of precautionary, my pulmonologist was like, monitor things if you got to go to the ER just to get checked out, just to sort of ease of mind. And that's what I did. And so she said, just the ER doctor, my pulmonologist, said, just quarantine just in case and just to be safe. So you're stuck – even before there was a statewide lockdown – you're stuck in the house, your business is shot, you have nothing to cover, you have nothing to write about, and granted, there is one outlet. You and I both have a colleague, somewhat of a mentor when we were young journalists coming up, Steve Karp, the managing editor at Gaming Today. He has found ways to keep a majority of his main writers busy. And so I've been able to write a column every week for Gaming Today. Doesn't pay a lot, but it contributes to those little bits of help that I've received from different people. But yes, when you don't have something to go out and cover and interact with people, I have found myself engaging in video chats on Zoom with the Edmonton Oilers because I was on their mailing list from when the Golden Knights were set to play them, and they asked they put you on the media list for like 2-3 days before and 2-3 days after. I asked to stay on it since they're in the same division. Well, they've been sending email alerts for these Zoom interviews. I go on them just for the 30 minutes just to feel worthwhile again.
Yeah,
so you
absolutely.
feel like you're doing something, and I'll tweet it. You follow me on Twitter. I'll tweet screenshots and quotes of Edmonton Oilers. We're not getting that from the Golden Knights. We're not getting that from any other locals, and that's fine if that's their decision. But anything that I can be involved in, I reach out to the San Jose Sharks because they started doing that. Because you sort of just feel this worthless. You get this worthless sense about you. You know what I mean? To be able to come on and do this talk show is something, because your mind is working again. I mean, I'm watching The Sopranos for the 67th time in the history of the damn show. I'm watching movies. It's gotten to the point, Scott, where I hit the contour menu and I can scroll through the movie channels and I can see a movie that I've seen so many times and I see how much time is left and I guess what scene it is before I click and go to that channel. And 9 out of 10 times I'm right.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Oh, and that's the thing. Like I have not been. It was the 30th anniversary this past week of the UNLV National Championship in basketball, and I watch that game probably 4 times a year anyway, every year. But I'm not one of those guys who can go back and watch like old sports unless it's a really classic game. I've been watching a lot of the NFL films, documentaries, and all that stuff. But yeah, but Willie, I know, man. I mean, a lot of people, especially everybody around the country, is going through the same thing. A lot of people are out of work and have lost their income. And here in Las Vegas, we're especially hard hit by that because we are focused on the hospitality industry and the entertainment industry. Entertainers are, they're performing on Facebook and Instagram and all this kind of stuff just to keep busy. And so we're glad to see you doing that too. Now, Willie, if somebody wants to contribute to help these independent writers across the country, do they hit up the Facebook page, or what's the best way for them to contribute?
Yeah, I think if you Google, if you maybe from your accounts, and if they scroll my timeline, they can find that M Live story, or if they Google Larry Lage, Lage, and M Live, the story will pop up, and at the very bottom, there's a link to the Facebook fundraiser where they can donate to freelance journalists. I mean, it goes into the fund, and then Larry disseminates. There was one point where he tweeted out an actual amount and how many journalists had benefited, and I just looked to see what the average was. And I tell you what, this guy has been so accurate to stay on point as to, I haven't received a payment in a while, and that's fine because I was one of the first. And so as it grew, I kept getting payments, and then new people were coming aboard. So he was playing catch up with the newer journalists. And again, I have no problem with that because I turned him on to a young local journalist who's fresh out of J school, I think 3-4 years removed. Anyway, Larry's done a great job in making sure that everybody's getting sort of an equal share of that as his roster of freelance journalists grows. It's really been a tremendous thing. And you speak about the UNLV. Just a side note, in January, I remember you replied to a tweet when I tweeted a picture of Dave Rice, and I was at practice in Seattle, and then we went out to dinner, and I sat in a film room with him for about an hour, and we did an interview, knowing that the project was coming up for the 30-year anniversary. If you go to the Review Journal's website today, I have a story. I have 2 stories, both based off that trip. One is on Dave's recollection of it being one of the greatest teams ever and how it was such a big show and a must-see event. And the other one was a sort of a tribute to him crediting Tarkanian for his career. So really good package put together by myself, Ed Graney, and Ron Kantowski on the 30-year anniversary for this being Final Four weekend.
Yeah, and Willie, we'll and it's great. It was great for you to be able to sit with our good friend Dave Rice and check it out. He I think said it perfectly, and especially his recollections of Coach Tarkanian. But Willie, listen, we're going to link to that. We appreciate you being with us, and we'll check in with you again soon. All right, my friend?
All right, thanks, guys.
All right, Willie Ramirez, the AP sports writer. Really interesting take on what's happening and how it impacts the sports world. A story that hasn't really been told about how all of the folks that disseminate information for you to keep up with sports and what they're going through during this. All right, we're going to step aside. We come back. Evan Groat from Just Pod Baby will be with us. You're listening to the Silver and Black today here on CBS Sports Radio 1140.
From Bristol Motor Speedway, it's a PRN Class.
This is Cliff Branch, former of the Oakland Raiders, 3-time Super Bowl champ, 4-time Pro Bowl, and you listen to the Silver and Black Show.
Welcome back to the Silver and Black today here on CBS Sports Radio 1140. Again, thank you to W.G. Willie Ramirez for coming on, and a story that has not been told a lot, and so we wanted to tell it. You know, yes, some folks might have coronavirus fatigue. You're tired of hearing about it, but you know what? These are real stories impacting real people in the world of sports, so we cover it, and we were glad to have him on. All right, now we go back out on the phone line, and we bring in our good friend, now a member of the family. That's right. If you haven't gone to subscribe to the Just Pod Baby podcast yet, long-running podcast, very great, hosted by Evan Groat, go do so. It's now part of the Silver and Black Today Media Group. He is now on the team, and I bring in our good friend, Evan. How you doing, Evan?
Hey, guys. How you doing? I'm doing all right.
Yeah, you're hanging in too, right?
Yeah, we're trying. You know, I got the kids at home and trying to keep them busy and keep my kindergarten son up to date with all his schoolwork. But, yeah, we're hanging in there.
Yeah, that's right. Everybody is now a teacher and can appreciate the work that's done when they're at school. So from that side of it, it's a good thing. All right, let's talk about the Raiders. Now, you know, on your most recent podcast, you talked with Vinny Bonsignor from the RJ guy we have here on the show all the time about what the Raiders had done in free agency on defense in particular. And then, of course, you see Demarius Randall added in the last few days. What's your view on the takeaways on this free agent class and what they were able to do in such a short period of time?
Well, I think when you look at it right now on paper, obviously the defense it's much improved. I think one of those big areas where they had to address was the linebacker position, and they did a good job with that, getting Kwiatkowski and Littleton. I do still think there's some work to be done there. That would be, if I had to come up with a list of top 5 positions that still need to be addressed. I think they need to add another body to the linebacker room. But I do like what they did overall, addressing the defensive line as well, bringing in Malik Collins, who I think is going to – I think he is the guy who's not getting a lot of press, but I think he's going to be the player that has the biggest impact on the defense this year. For so long we've heard all about how there hasn't been a presence on the inside who can bring pressure, and I think now that they have Collins, he's going to definitely help with that. And I think that NASA is a very underrated signing as well. So I like what they've done. Cornerback definitely still needs to be addressed. Obviously, the deal with Eli Apple fell through, but I think with one of those 2 first-round picks, I think they definitely look to bring in a cornerback.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask you, because I've been pretty steadfast that they should use that second pick, the number 19 overall, unless they jockey around and trade up or down, whatever it may be, to get a cornerback. Yes, they had a need at safety. Now they brought in Randall, which addresses that a little bit. And you always need depth. But now we're hearing a little bit, and we're going to ask Scott Bair at the top of the hour. We're hearing they might even be looking defensive tackle in the first round. Do you see that? I mean, if you're looking at those 3 cornerbacks, I think there's a 3 at the very top. Which one of those guys? Are you a C.J. Henderson guy?
Well, I know our guy Mo Moten. He's pretty adamant that he believes they should add a defensive tackle, but I don't know if one will be available there. I know he's Derek Brown obviously is one of the better ones in the draft, and Javad Kinlaw, but I'm not sure if one of them makes it to 12 or 19, whichever spot you want to make that pick in. So I do think that it will be a cornerback, and I do like C.J. Henderson quite a bit. Again, I'm not sure if he'll be around at pick 19. So I think if they do want to get Henderson, they may have to use that 12 pick on him rather than, hoping that he falls to 19.
Yeah. Again, we're talking to Evan Groat, the host of the Just Pod Baby podcast, a member of the Silver and Black Today Media Group, about the Raiders, their moves, and what's going on. Kelly, you had something for Evan, right?
Well, yeah, you guys just brought up defensive tackle. Hey, Evan, it's Kelly, by the way. Yeah, I see 2, talking Kinlaw and Brown, first-round kind of guys. Everything else is going to be second. Let me ask Evan, do you think maybe a trade back from 9 to the early second to get a defensive tackle and an extra pick is on the table?
Definitely. I would be on board with the trade back. I'm not sure if I would rather they trade back all the way into round 2, maybe later into round 1 and pick up an extra 3. That would be the route that I prefer they go, and then maybe possibly package one of those seconds or something to move up into the second round, or something along those lines. But I'm not sure if I want to see them fall out of round 1 with that second pick. I still think they need to make that pick in round 1. But if there's a guy that they love and they think they can get him, later in the draft, then that's the move they're going to make.
Hey, Evan, it's Chaz. Welcome to the team, my man.
Thank you very much.
You mentioned another linebacker. You think maybe they stay in-house and kind of go look at Tahir Whitehead or possibly Burfict and bring him back on something small deal?
I think that ship has sailed with Burfict. I think after what happened last season, obviously going into this season, if he was ever to get in any more trouble or pick up any other unsportsmanlike penalties, I think, obviously he would be done for a while again. So I don't think they want to go down that route again. I honestly think the best bet would be to go into the draft and look for someone young, cheap, someone who you can teach the system. Some of the guys that I like the kid out of Oregon later in the draft, Troy Dye. I think he would be a good fit. He can run. He's athletic. He's a playmaker. And I think he'll be available there in the third or fourth round, and that's where they have, 3 picks in that third round. So he's a guy that I wouldn't mind them taking a look at. Also, there's Willie Gay Jr. out of, I believe he's from, I think it's Mississippi State. He had a really good combine. He tested really well. He's been in some trouble, but I think that stuff is behind him, and I think those would be 2 players that I would look to target in the draft.
Again, we're talking to Evan Groat, who is the host of the Just Pod Baby podcast. You can subscribe to it on any channel you like, Spotify, iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, wherever you get your podcast, you'll be able to find it. Evan, now when you look back at this free agent class and what the Raiders were able to do thus far, what one move did you absolutely love above all else? And then what move maybe made you scratch your head a little bit?
Obviously, the one that made me scratch my head is Jason Witten, and I think a lot of people share that thought as well. I just thought that the tight end room was already a pretty strong room for the team. I think it was one of the strongest position groups on the roster. I understand the leadership he brings and the mentorship that he can bring to the room, but I just don't see it. I know that Foster Moreau is may not be back to full health when the season begins, but I think that they maybe could have won a cheaper option with that. I think his contract was worth $5 million, I believe. So I was cut off guard with that signing. And the move that I like the most is I mentioned it already. Malik Collins in the middle. I think if you go all the way back to when the Khalil Mack days, all you're hearing was, they need someone on the inside. They need someone on the inside, and they were never able to really bring someone in that could help generate pressure from the inside to help with those edge rushers. And I think we're in the same boat again now. We have, you've got Max Crosby and Cleveland Farrell, 2 promising young edge rushers, but there's nothing coming up the middle. Maurice Hurst really hasn't developed into what they thought he would be. PJ Hall to this point has been a disappointment. So I think when you bring in a guy like Malik Collins, he's only 24 years old, which is one thing I really like. Yep, young guy. You can develop him. He'll be around for a while. And I think he has the juice and he has the ability that you need to help get some rush on the inside. So I like that signing a lot.
Absolutely. Always good to hear your thoughts, Evan. And make sure you hear Evan's thoughts every week on Just Pod Baby. Go make sure you subscribe to that now a member of the Silver and Black Today Media Group. Evan, I know you got a new show coming up, and we'll make sure everybody gets it next weekend. Thanks, brother, and we'll talk to you real soon.
That's right, guys. Check me out on Fridays, all right? Thanks. Hey, guys, also I want to say thank you to Scott. Thanks for giving me the opportunity to be a part of the team, and I'm excited about it.
Oh, man, we're happy to have you. It's going to be a blast. Again, Evan Groat, Just Pod Baby. Make sure you go subscribe to that podcast. Okay, we're going to step aside. When we come back, we'll talk a little more Raiders news this week, including the $1 million donation they made in the midst of this crisis, as well as Rodney Hudson's contract restructure, and, of course, the apple falling from the tree. You're listening to the Silver and Black Today here on CBS.
GOV and click on Plan Ahead Nevada.
Sponsored by the U.S. Department of Homeland Security, Nevada Department of Public Safety, Division of Emergency Management, your local emergency manager's office. Aired in cooperation with the Nevada Broadcasters Association and this station.
My part-time service in the Army National Guard makes it possible for me to be more for the community I call home. I'm a better neighbor because my service has taught me how important it is to be a team player.
Aired by the Nevada Broadcasters Association and this station.
CBS Sports Radio. The only way to take Silver and Black today with you is with the radio.com app. Download it today and search CBS Sports Radio 1140 in Las Vegas and listen to us anytime, anywhere.
Welcome back to the Silver and Black today here on CBS Sports Radio 1140. Thanks for being with us. We hope you are not losing your minds being cooped up inside and that we can bring a little bit of Raider talk to you on this Sunday as we do every Sunday. And guys, guess what? This is exactly our 100th live show.
Whoa.
There you go.
Woo-hoo.
We've been on for 103 weeks. We've had a couple pre-taped interviews and one best of show. So only one show hasn't been new content. So here we are on the 100th anniversary. Oh my gosh, excuse me.
That's
blah. Yes, being locked up in the house with 4 kids and your wife, you lose your mind. But no, it's all good. But no, we thank all of you. Without the listeners and without the support of the Entercom family, and of course our program director Paul Ihender and our executive producer and the man keeping us on the air, Mr. Mark Bonilla. Without all of them and countless others who've been associated with the show, want to thank all of them and all of you for your support because we wouldn't be here without it. So pretty cool. Now, if we look at Raiders news this week, guys, there was some. Hey, listen, Rodney Hudson. I mean, can this guy do anything wrong? He restructures his deal to free up cap room for the Raiders, Kelly, and his salary, $11.6 million of his base salary, converted to a fully guaranteed roster bonus, which frees up $9.3 million for the Raiders to go out and use, and I'm sure they used some of that on Demarius Randall already. But Kelly, talk about him doing that and what it's going to be able to free up for the Raiders and maybe address some of their other needs.
Well, every player is always willing to restructure their deal because that just means you're getting more guaranteed money right now. You know, going to a roster bonus, he gets that check right now. You know. So you can always find salary cap space. You can always find money because there's always somebody. They don't want to take a pay cut, but they'll do a restructuring because that means you're keeping your same contract. It's just how you get your money's different. And 99% of the time, that money's coming now instead of, spread out over 2 years, spread out over, how they do it. So basically all they did was some creative financing work, paid him a bigger sum today than he was going to have by the end of the year. But like you said, it opens up cap space. And I mean, with the Raiders, they weren't as bad as the Chiefs, where I saw the Chiefs the other day had $177 left on their salary cap, which is probably the most impressive finagling of finances I've ever seen. But I mean, it is a lot. It's a decent chunk of money, and it gives them room to make a couple more moves. But I mean, let's be honest, he's still getting the money. It's not like he gave up money for anything. He's just getting it sooner.
Right. So you're saying it's not as much of a selfless act. You agree with that, Chaz?
No, he's 100% correct. And I thought the Raiders did a great job. They didn't overspend. So far in this free agency, they've got a lot of good value from all of their signings so far. And for him to do that, that just that opens up another spot. I know. There's, Dre Kirkpatrick. Kirkpatrick has been released from Cincinnati. I know he's got the Gunther, the angle there. That could be a cornerback, somebody that they look at. And, there's still a few options out there. I know you need to save some money for the draft. These young players, I'm not sure how Kansas City's going to sign any of their draft players if they don't have any money left. But, it was a great
Kansas City just restructured Sammy Watkins' contract, so they're getting more cap space on that.
Yeah,
Right.
and they kept everybody in pretty much from that Super Bowl championship team. Now, a lot of people say, well, that's because Mahomes hasn't had his new deal yet. While that might be true, it still means that they're going to be formidable for years to come. But also this season, you're going to have to deal with that team intact pretty much for this season. Sans a couple players here and there, but yeah, no, I mean it was a good move by the Raiders. It shows you that they know what they still need and that they had to free up some cash. But Kelly, as we talked about, dude, on the podcast last week, which was the way the Raiders structured those contracts here in the couple minutes we have left, people thought, well, geez, they don't have the money because they're not giving these big bonuses. But in reality, they've just been very prudent with their money. And then knowing that they were going to restructure some of these deals, and I still think there might be one or two left that they're going to do, and maybe a player they move, they should have enough money to go out and get, if there is any impact free agent they feel they want, plus be able to sign all those draft picks.
Yeah, money is not going to be an issue. I think they're pretty much done. I won't say big ticket, but I mean, if they sign anybody else now, it is going to be just smaller deal stuff because I don't really think there's anybody out there that they're going to target for like a bigger contract. But I mean, yeah, you're right. It's the rookie pool and everything like that. That's kind of already going to be figured in, so they already know what they're going to be spending on that. Because like I said, they may make a trade back. I don't see them trading up, especially up into like a top 5 or 6 spot where there's going to be a big jump in that money. So that stuff will be fine. That's something they don't really have to deal with. I have to worry about that. But yeah, you mentioned how they structure the contracts. They're doing the roster bonuses instead of signing bonuses. I see that changing because they don't want to set that precedent. So the next time they try to sign somebody, like, well, you gave this guy a signing bonus. Why can't I get that?
Yeah, they're all interconnected. It'll be interesting to watch as we move forward. But don't go anywhere. We're going to come up here on the end of our first hour with you on this beautiful Sunday in Las Vegas. Nice sunshine. I don't know what it's like where you're at, but here it's nice and warm. I'm going to get out in the backyard today. But when we come back, we're going to be joined by Scott Bair from NBC SportsNet up in the Bay Area, longtime Raiders reporter. We'll talk to him about what the Raiders might be thinking in the draft and what all this free agency means, what they might be up to, and also a little bit about the NFL and its future after all of this is by us. You're listening to the Silver and Black today here on CBS Sports Radio 1140.
we've got your Raiders covered.
Knock on wood if you're with me.
It's Silver and Black today on CBS Sports Radio 1140. And now, here's your host, Scott Gulbransen.
Welcome back for hour number 2 here on the Silver and Black today on CBS Sports Radio 1140. We hope you're having a good day out there. Keeping sane, keeping busy, finding something to do with yourself, but at least we're going to give you the opportunity to talk some Raiders football. That's right. And we're going out on the phones now and bringing in one of our favorite guys, someone who's covered the Raiders for a long time and does a great job of it. So we said, hey, let's get him on the air because he's at home too, like the rest of us. Mr. Scott Bair from NBC SportsNet up in the Bay Area. How you doing today, Scott?
Pretty good, although it is sort of like Groundhog Day. Every day is the same. My wife is working from home. I'm working from home. The kids' daycare is closed, so it's 4 beating hearts plus a cat. And we're just trying to make the best of it, trying to survive somehow in 1,100 square feet.
Yeah, and it's interesting because the entire media, for the most part, I mean, you see some people are in studio now and then, but most of us have to do it from home, it presents its own challenges. Luckily, we live in an era with technology where we can do it, maybe not at the same quality that we always do it when we're in the studio, but always fun. And you have not skipped a beat, continuing to cover the Raiders and what's been going on. And I wanted to start with you around, of course, they just add Demarius Randall to what was really a good and impressive free agent class, especially on defense. How would you evaluate how they've done thus far and addressing those holes that they had on defense?
I'll be honest with you. Free agency can be fool's gold, and normally this time of year, everybody gives an A, right, for what they bring in. And the Jets probably could have said that about Tremaine Johnson a couple years ago, and that didn't work out well, right? I'm sure this time last year we probably would have said how great of a pickup Antonio Brown was, and that didn't work out. But I am extremely confident, understanding that there are pratfalls in free agency, that Mike Mayock once again executed a level of discipline in getting the guys that he wanted to fill needs that he was looking to fill with guys in their prime. I mean, there are so many good deals, especially on defense. The 2 linebackers they got, incredible. But my favorite is defensive tackle Malik Collins, a guy that would have led the Raiders in pressures last year, a 3 technique that Paul Gunther is dying for. They still need help. They still aren't done getting guys to make an immediate impact. But I think that this free agent class makes a team that was 7-9 last year really in the 9-7, 10-6 hunt.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. That Malik Collins and Evan Groat, who was on with us earlier, said the same thing, that was probably the sneakiest, best signing they made, that most fans might not be familiar with Malik Collins' name. And he's only 24 years old, so much more development and opportunity for him to get better and to really impact on the Raiders. What about Corey Littleton? That one excited me when I saw that they were able to do it, especially what price they paid for him. But Scott, that linebacking core needed everything, and they've done a nice job with him and a gentleman you interviewed on your last podcast. By the way, if you don't subscribe to Scott's podcast, make sure you do. It was a great one. Nick Kwiatkowski you just had on. Talk about him and what those 2 guys are going to be able to do that the Raiders haven't been able to do in several years.
Yeah, I mean, they're really perfect complementary linebackers because so kind of downhill, he's more of a traditional, run-stopping middle linebacker, and Corey plays sideline to sideline. He's a true cell linebacker. He's not the 250-pound guy with the neck roll and 5 bars on He's 225. He can go sideline to sideline. He can do so many things that the Raiders have not been able to do in recent years. I mean, how many times have I been on your show? How many times that the inability to stop Travis Kelce? He is a Raider killer, right?
Yes.
Because they can't cover running backs and they can't cover tight ends. Well, guess what? They can cover running backs and they can cover tight ends well. You mentioned Randall earlier, and he's going to fit into that equation as well. They have 2, cover guys who can kind of get things done. The thing that amazes me, right, is the lack of investment at the linebacker position since Rolando McLean. I like to call it the curse of Rolando, because after him, who was he was a first-round pick, they didn't use a pick higher than the fourth round on a linebacker. They didn't give anybody a contract higher than $18 million over the course of 3 years, $6 million per. Since he was drafted in the first round, and you know what? They've had a cavalcade of Nick Roach and Curtis Lofton and Perry Riley and Navarro Bowman at his wit's end, and they finally invested in a position that is important. And you look at the free agents that they've signed, and this isn't exclusive, but if you look at the bulk of them, it's through the middle of that defense. Collins, defense.
Hello.
He dropped.
Okay, well, we'll get Scott back on here in a minute. But guys, he's making a good point there, though, too, that finally you're seeing that investment in that middle of the field, right, Kelly? We talked about it so often on how they needed help there, and that's what they've been able to do, not only on the line but also the linebacker.
Yeah, I mean, you guys know how much I love talking linebackers, because Gunther's system doesn't prioritize the linebacker. Looks like they might be switching defensive systems after this year, because they definitely prioritize linebackers this year.
Yeah,
it's
that's
we've been snake bitten with linebackers. That even with the corner position, the draft, Gary Conley, Carl Joseph, DJ Hayden. It's just been like a revolving door. We just haven't been able to find anything on that defensive side of the ball. So, things are starting to stick. Abrams, hopefully Jonathan Abram turns out to be something nice. We saw Trayvon Mullen coming into his own last year. And so, with these additions, Corey Littleton, that's high of an impact players you can get. And then, these are young ascending players that we've got. All these signings, these aren't old players, like Evan was saying and Scott was saying. These are 24, 25, 26-year-old guys. They're not solid veteran role players that you're just hoping to squeeze that last ounce out of. These are up and coming ascending players. So I think it's really starting to shape up nicely.
Yeah, Scott, we got you back?
Yeah, sorry about that.
All right, that's okay. That's the world we're dealing with right now. Things are just happening. It's the way it goes. No, but you were talking about the middle of that field and what they've been able to do to really invest for the first time. And in fact, it's interesting because, and I know Kelly's got a question for you, but I just want to make this one point: is sometimes you watch fans and younger fans have been so starved and they've never grown up with a Raiders team with solid, just really over the top good linebackers. So when the Raiders have brought in guys to at least be placeholders, they often treat them like they're Pro Bowlers, and there's nothing against those players, but it's nice to finally find a day. Again, we're talking to Scott Bair from NBC Sports Bay Area. Kelly, you had a question for Scott?
I do, Scott. Okay, Scott. Yeah. We mentioned linebackers, which we all know I love. I'm more of the draft guy. I've been on Jerry Jeudy at 12 from the second they got the 12th pick in the. I'm hoping he lasts that long. If he is there, do you think that the Raiders are going to draft him, or do you think they'll look at Lamb, Ruggs, or maybe even another wide receiver?
Yeah, I think that's going to be an interesting development, because as we get closer to the draft, Mike Mayock is going to really try to quiet some things down, just like he did last year. Remember last year he fired a bunch of scouts kind of right before everything got rolling, and he wants to keep everything pretty close to the vest. I know that Jerry Jeudy's there, CeeDee Lamb and Ruggs and all those guys. And it's a story that I'm going to write for the website as well. And it may not be a popular opinion, but the stance is this, right? That at this point, cornerback and wide receiver, the needs are maybe not equal, but they're close. And my point is this, is that wide receiver, there's a lot of good guys. You just named 3 or 4 of them really quick, right? Name me how many true plug-and-play cornerbacks that there are, right? It's a smaller number. And that's why, while I think Jerry Jeudy is really interesting. I'm more of a CeeDee Lamb guy because the Raiders need a guy who's not strictly, but more of an outside presence. Hunter Renfrow is going to occupy the slot for the Raiders for a long time. Jerry Jeudy, I think, will eventually fit into the slot. But you look at it, right, and C.J. Henderson is a guy that could be available at 12, maybe not the best tackler, but a true plug-and-play cornerback. So I'm not answering your question directly. I'm just saying that fans should also kind of think about the fact that they need a cornerback pretty bad, and there aren't as many elite-level players, so maybe they go corner there. Now, Jerry Jeudy is getting a lot of Amari Cooper comps. That's a pretty good thing. Again, I really think CeeDee Lamb can be a pretty special player, especially in John Gruden's offense. So if he's sitting there and I'm the general manager, I don't know if I could pass on him. But I think that there is more. There's a bit more intrigue to the number 12 pick as opposed to they take the best wideout. Right? That I think that at this point, after what happened with the Eli Apple deal, I think that cornerback has to come into play here at some point, at least in Raiders fans' thinking, when the silver and black are on the clock.
Interesting. No, that's an interesting perspective. I know you also wrote about defensive tackle there and so on. So, and you're right. They've done a good job of kind of keeping things in house. Chaz, you had a question too, right, about the quarterback position?
Well, just to keep it on the draft. I know kind of one of the big stories last week was the Justin Herbert the phone call, and I know these teams they're only allowed 3 calls a week for what, no more than an hour each call. So is this the Raiders doing their due diligence, or you think it's a smokescreen, or do you think a quarterback is in this draft is something that the Raiders are looking at?
I think they have a call scheduled with Jordan Love as well. And I think it's weird because if you were to ask Mayock or Gruden directly, they would say due diligence, right? And maybe there's not a fascination, but there's an enjoyment of sitting down and talking to quarterbacks. They wined and dined Kyler Murray last year. They were never going to take Kyler Murray. If Nick Bosa was there, they were going to take Nick Bosa. But I think it's part of the due diligence thing. I think if you look back at the track record of John Gruden working out quarterbacks that he then doesn't draft has been it's a long and proud tradition that goes back to his days with Tampa Bay when he had control of their draft board. So I would be, I don't know if shocked is the right word, but I would be pretty surprised if but because you never really know, but I would be pretty surprised if the Raiders took a quarterback in the first round. I think the Raiders could take a quarterback in later rounds, because what they've got here is they have Derek Carr, who is a presumptive, and I would say that he's going to be the starter in 2020. And then you have Marcus Mariota, who is probably the most expensive and maybe the best backup in football. And those two guys are going to be on that spot in the depth chart. But with the way that Marcus Mariota's contract works, they can get out of that deal after this season. The way that Derek Carr's contract works, I'm sure that you guys have talked about it. It cuts down to just $2.5 million in dead money. And I think ultimately what they do here is they could. Who knows when Jalen Hurts is going to go? The connection between him and the Raiders is very strong, but he could maybe go higher than they would like. So they could snap up a guy with a 3rd round pick, and they could develop him and wait and see what Carr does and wait and see what Mariota does, and then make their quarterback decision after the season is done. Because after the season is done, while John Gruden will have been around for a little while, still has a lot farther to go on that contract. So kind of a long-winded way of saying that I do think that it is due diligence, but I also think they could take a signal caller at some point. I just don't think it's going to be the first round.
Yeah, good point too. And Justin Herbert, of course, the Chargers are quarterback starved. They need a quarterback, and if they were to go to quarterback, why not talk to a guy that you're going to see in your division twice a year? So not a bad strategy if I'm Mayock and Gruden. Scott, with about 15 seconds I have left, does the NFL season start on time in your view?
No, I really think that you listen to all these, the politicians, and I'm not going to give my take on how they're responding to this crisis. But the president kind of has floating dates, and it's always a moving target. But the governor of California, Gavin Newsom, also said yesterday that he wouldn't anticipate his 3 California teams starting on time, and that's the way you get into these power struggles and things. And we're going to have the virtual elimination of an off-season program. It's a very complicated question, but I just can't see it starting on time, considering what's going on right now and the fact that it's it's still in the throes of it. So nonetheless, if I were to give a quick answer, which I'm terrible at, I would say that they would not start on time, but I do think they play the season eventually, and I think they eventually play it in front of fans.
All right. Scott Bair, man, appreciate all the work that you do and, of course, the time you gave us today. May you and your family be safe.
Thank you, guys. Right back at you.
All right. Thanks, Scott. Scott Bair, NBC Sports Bay Area, does a great job of covering the Raiders. Make sure you follow him and subscribe to his podcast. All right. We're going to step aside when we come back. Spero Dedes from NFL on CBS will be with us. We'll talk to him about what might happen with the league, and also we'll get his take on the Raiders. You're listening to the Silver and Black today here on CBS Sports Radio 1140.
You found the most in-depth coverage of the Silver and Black. This is Silver and Black Today, live on CBS Sports Radio 1140. Here's your host, Scott Gulbransen.
Welcome back to the Silver and Black today here on CBS Sports Radio 1140 in Las Vegas. Thanks again to Scott Bair from NBC SportsNet up in the Bay Area for joining us and giving his thoughts on Raider free agency. We now go out to another one of the great young broadcasters in the business, somebody I love and enjoy watching, Spero Dedes from CBS Sports, who joins us now. And Spero, listen, the NFL, all the talk, everybody's wondering when it's going to be back because of all that we're going through. Just off the top, I know you're not a Nostradamus, but tell me what you think. What's your gut feel on if the NFL season will start on time or if we might just have a little bit of a delay?
Hi, guys. Well, first of all, good morning. It's great to be with you. You know, I just think, guys, we're just such in an area of unknown at this point. You know, I listened to the president's comments yesterday, and you know, like everyone else, I appreciate the optimism and wanting to, I think, put everyone at ease and give everyone something to look forward to. But at this point, I have to say, you know, based on the news we're getting every day, based on the trajectory of this virus and the entire situation, just the scope of it, at this point, I mean, I would be surprised if the season starts on time. I really would. I think, you know, until there is a vaccine, until there is that kind of psychological security for people, I don't know how you put, you know, 60, 70,000 people in stadiums or in arenas. You know, obviously the NBA and the NHL are in a more immediate situation trying to restart their seasons. But I just think we're so far away from when those decisions have to be made, and just kind of how bleak things look right now. If I was a betting man, I would be surprised if the season were to start on time. But I mean, look, I hope I'm wrong, and I hope that you know, that we have preseason football in August, and I hope that this thing starts for real, you know, when it should in September.
Yeah, definitely one day at a time. I think that's the attitude I've kind of prescribed to is, you know, you have to prepare for the worst, but then be prepared for maybe some good news and surprises as we move through these weeks ahead. Spero, when you look at the draft now, clearly the format has to change. We've seen over the last couple days a lot of reports about how they're going to do this virtually. The challenges that are presented there for the individual teams. I mean, most of us are working from home, so we think of it and say, well, geez, it's not hard to work from home. But when you put in the complexity of an NFL draft and you talk about multiple phone calls coming in and phone lines and all these things that you need if you're entertaining trades, if you're a team and you're calling players and all that. When you look at that piece of it, how do you think that's all going to work out, and how are we going to adjust to it?
You know, guys, I think it's such a challenge for front offices now, for coaching staffs, because at this stage of the process, you know, you're a couple of weeks away from the draft. This is when you want to meet with your prospect, you know, sit him down, spend time with him, look him in the eye, you know, really find out what makes him tick. And I know there's been some of that in the past, you know, around the combine and the lead up to that whole part of the calendar. But now removing that kind of person-to-person element during this stage of the process, I think it makes it very, very challenging. You know, you try to get into the mind of a John Gruden and Mike Mayock as they try to figure out, you know, really kind of bone up in terms of who they want to take now, because now you're getting so close to the draft, and these are some huge decisions that these organizations have to make. So I would imagine it's very, very difficult. You know, now you're really kind of relying on your instinct, you're relying on your preparation, on your scouts, and ultimately you have to make a decision under a set of circumstances that none of these guys have ever experienced before. And so, you know, it's such a crapshoot in a lot of ways, but I guess at this point in time, you just really have to rely on your gut, your instinct, all the work, the countless, you know, the thousands of hours that these teams and scouting departments and front offices have put forth, and just hope that you make the right decision. But it's unprecedented, guys, in every way. You know, draft preparation, season preparation. You know, it's just a crazy time on so many levels.
It is. They're going to have a lot of reliance on scouting reports and film, right? Again, we're talking to Spero Dedes from CBS Sports.
Hey, Spero, it's Chaz. It's been a long time, my man. How are you and your loved ones holding up? Everyone safe and healthy?
Chaz, it's been too long. You know, we're good. We're down in Orange County in California. We're hunkered down at the house like everyone else. You know, we're trying to stay positive. I mean, we're very fortunate where we live. It's not a super congested area, so you know we're able to get out a little bit and walk, and just paying attention to the news. I grew up in North Jersey, which is really being hard hit at this point. I know a lot of folks there who are, you know, struggling, who have been affected directly by the virus. You know, we know a couple of people who unfortunately have passed away due to it in the town where I grew up. I've got a doctor, a cousin of mine who's a doctor in an ER in one of the biggest hospitals in New York City. And he, you know, we were texting back and forth. We reached out to him to let him know we were thinking about him. And he said, he actually described it as hell on earth right now in his hospital. And, you know, this is someone who's been an ER doctor for more than 10 years. So, you know, in New York. And so to consider what he's seen in his career and to describe it like that kind of hit home for us. So just a real scary situation overall, and we're just hoping everyone stays safe and heeds the authorities' advice to stay indoors and stay home.
Yeah, it is unbelievable times. It's something else. So, okay, well, from a broadcaster's perspective, I'm sure you had your March Madness regional assignment already in place, and I know you called an NBA game a couple of days before the shutdown. So, where were you when you heard the Rudy Gobert news? And then take us through kind of how the powers that be let you and your colleagues know that things were going to be canceled.
Well, we called the game for Turner for NBA TV in Atlanta the night before the Gobert news and the news that the league was shutting down came. And so I had just gotten back home, spent the day with family here. And then, we were just kind of settling in to kind of watch that night's game, sit and have dinner when we got news that it was kind of coming down. And, even in the days leading up to that, we had all kind of known that this was a possibility. The NCAA tournament news had come down. League tournaments at that point were getting canceled. And so Turner, to their credit, like a lot of these sports networks, really kind of lending their, emails of support, phone calls. Hey, anyone not comfortable getting on a plane? There's no issues with that. You just let us know. So everyone, I think, mentally was kind of preparing themselves for that moment. But then, still to see it, that the league is suspending operations, that was a jolt to the system. It really was. And, the NCAA tournament being canceled. I mean, this is truly once in a lifetime stuff. I mean, I think we throw that term around pretty loosely, but this is something none of us have ever lived through. Hopefully we never live through it again. And, I think it just kind of puts things into perspective, as sports, as great as sports are such a huge part of our lives. Right now, I just think the important thing is everyone's health and just trying to get our arms around this and make the world kind of a safer place to live at this point.
Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, that just shows how powerful sports is. The Rudy Gobert thing, right when that domino fell, it just seemed like everything shut down immediately after that. When sports shuts down, it seemed like the rest of the country just followed suit. So, well, let's move it back to some Raiders talk here. I know you broadcast an NFL game almost every week during the season, so I know you are knowledgeable when it comes to all 32 teams. So, tell me what you think about the Raiders. What do you think about the coach, the job that Coach Gruden is doing, and the move to Las Vegas?
Well, I mean, the move to Vegas, before all this virus stuff was started to hit, it was certainly the talk of the NFL. I mean, I don't think there's ever been a greater marriage between city and NFL team, just in terms of what the persona, what the motif has been of the Raiders organization, kind of that, that outlaw personality, that outlaw approach, and what better town to play their games than Vegas. I just think it's going to be such a perfect marriage. It's going to be so exciting. The stadium looks incredible. All of us who cover the league and are in a privileged position to broadcast NFL games, everyone's looking forward to getting to that stadium and experiencing what the fan base is like there. I mean, it's just going to be incredible. Huge John Gruden fan. I've been a fan of John's for a long time. He's had such an interesting career trajectory. Obviously the success with Oakland and what he did with Tampa, and then to step away from it for 10 years, such a long time. I mean, initially we all thought he was going to do TV for a little bit, and then he's going to jump right back in. Then it's 5 years, 6 years, 7 years. We're like, all right, maybe John's going to just stick to broadcasting. And then to come back 10 years later, just such a unique path that he's been on. And look, we knew the Raiders situation was going to be a work in progress. Obviously struggled year one with just 4 wins. Last year, I thought you really started to see his imprint on the franchise and the roster start to show itself on the field. The way that they started the season before injuries kind of derailed the year a little bit. I thought it was an important second step for them to get 7 wins, have a little bit of taste of success. And now year 3, this is when, as a Raider fan, you hope that they can kind of take that next step. But, I'm just fascinated by the combination of John and Mike Mayock. I had a chance to work with Mike at that NFL Network for a bunch of years. I had a chance to call a couple of games with him. I don't think I've ever been around a guy who has that complete a grasp of personnel and talent at the NFL level. I mean, working in this league, you get to work with ex-coaches, ex-front office people. Mike, to me, always stood out. I mean, he was it was unbelievable just to be in a room with him for 5 minutes. You were going to learn more about football than probably you had learned in your entire career. So you put him in a room in a combination with John Groat, two guys that are just such football savants. To me, if I'm a Raider fan, I mean, there's very few tandems that I could dream up that would make me feel more comfortable to think that they're going to figure it out at some point.
Again, we're joined by Spero Dedes here from CBS Sports. And before we let you go, Spero, you cover the AFC West too. You do Charger pregame. You've done Charger, preseason. Hello, spit it out. But this division. Thank you so much. This division is changing, right? So Phillip Rivers has now left the Chargers. You have Patrick Mahomes entrenched there. He's going to be there for a long, long time. And then the Raiders with a young quarterback and Derek Carr and the situation they have there, that's a little bit fluid. And then Denver kind of retooling now. Talk about the AFC West and how this might shape up over the next few years to be a very competitive division.
Yeah, guys, it was Denver for so many years, right? And then things change in the NFL. But this is, I get a chance to cover the NBA and the NFL. To me, the one great thing about the NFL is that every year, I mean, legitimately every team feels like they have a chance, and every season takes on its own kind of personality. And now to see what the AFC West has become, obviously with Kansas City at the top and Patrick Mahomes and now kind of everyone chasing them, it's very, very exciting. Oakland, I think, is a team on the rise. There's a sense of kind of renewed hope in L.A. with the Chargers to see what they're going to do at the quarterback position now as they, finally turn the page from Phillip Rivers. So it's going to be exciting. I mean, again, there's a new kind of tenor to the division with the Raiders moving to Las Vegas. So it's going to be a fun year. It really is. This is it's always been one of the best divisions to play, and it's just fun when there's newness to it. So, Raiders moving, the quarterback change in L.A. with the Chargers, obviously still trying to get acclimated in the city in L.A. where, let's face it, it's been tough to kind of move the needle for them. But, we know how talented they are at certain positions. So I think when you put all those things together, it makes for a really fun situation. So, at this point, we're just hoping that the virus and all that stuff kind of dissipates at some point, and we're talking more football, because I think it's really going to be a fun season if and when it starts.
Yeah, and part of the fun of that season is, of course, listening to you call games on CBS for football, and then, of course, we catch you when basketball gets rolling around again. We appreciate you spending time with us, and we wish you and your family the best of health, and hopefully we'll get to talk to you soon, maybe after the draft, and get your take on that.
I'd love to, guys. Thank you, and I hope you guys stay safe, and everyone listening is healthy and safe as well.
All right. Thanks, Spero Dedes, CBS Sports. We're going to step aside when we come back. It's time for Kelly's Corner. You're listening to the Silver and Black today here on CBS Sports Radio 1140.
Hi, this is Steve Wisniewski, and you're listening to the Silver and Black Today.
Oh, you are. Welcome back to the Silver and Black Today here on CBS Sports Radio 1140. We're all stuck at home, but we're talking to you. We appreciate you being with us and keeping us company and talking some Raider football because you know what? Football carries on, and there's some people who aren't appreciative of that. They think that everything should shut down. I don't agree with them. I'm being optimistic. I think we're going to get through this just fine. Doesn't mean we're not going to have some pain. Doesn't mean that we don't need to be careful and protect one another. But I am confident that everybody out there is going to come out of this good, and we're going to be better for it. And we will roll towards football season. And when we can worry about those things, we'll know that maybe these tough times have passed. All right, we're back. And this is the time of the show when we kind of really think deeply. You know, we really become massive intellectuals, and we think about, you know, what are the subjects in the world. Now, this is a sports show, and usually when Kelly's Corner comes up, it's usually sports related in some ways, most of the time, not all the time, but that's the beauty of this portion of the show is that Kelly chooses it. We don't know it beforehand, and so it's kind of whatever's on Kelly's mind is going to be what we talk about. So without further ado, I throw it to my good friend, Kelly Kriner.
Yeah, I probably should have warned you not. Only going to be a lot more Vegas-centric than some of the other stuff that I've done.
That's okay. We have
But,
listeners in Las Vegas, don't we?
Well, yeah, but I mean, yeah, you'll understand in a second. Yeah, well, yeah, with the NCAA tournament getting canceled, everybody's just jonesing and dying for that. You're seeing all kinds of simulations are killing me because almost every one of them has Kentucky in the Final Four, and that's my favorite team. But the best thing is you're seeing other websites and everything, you know, doing at Aaron Kessler, you know, Vegas guy, has 64 restaurants, and he did a restaurant bracket, breaking everything down like the NCAA tournament. And I, normally wouldn't have thought anything of it, didn't catch anything, until I saw one of his tweets where the 2 and 15 seed was Morimoto, which is one of the most expensive restaurants, in Vegas at MGM, about as high quality as you can get, was going against Secret Pizza at Cosmopolitan, a mediocre pizza place at best. And Secret Pizza was beating Morimoto. And it got me thinking, it's these idiots that do stuff like that are the reason that the Olive Garden is the #1 Italian restaurant in almost every city.
In the polls?
Because people just, like, you go to Yelp reviews, go best Italian. Olive Garden's top 3 in almost every city. No offense to the Olive Garden. If I'm, want to spend $15 on pasta, hey, I'm going to the Olive Garden. If I'm looking up best Italian food and the Olive Garden comes out, I'm never going to your city. That's just the first thing. And then so I'm rolling through some of the other seeds and everything, and it's just funny about how I found myself getting annoyed at a restaurant tournament that some guy put on his Twitter feed, but he has Todd's Unique Dining as a 5 seed that's losing to Ventano. I'm like, are you people crazy? Have you never been to Todd's Unique Dining? It's one of the best restaurants in Las Vegas. He has Joe Stone Crab as a 9 seed. Joe Stone Crab is one of the best restaurants in Las Vegas. It's a 9 seed. This just goes to show you how much I miss sports. I'm sitting here.
There's the zinger.
Not only did I go through every one of his things and voted on whichever restaurants I've been to, several of these I haven't been to. Just not my, not my type of food or whatever it is. But I went through the ones that I would do. But then I also did the TV character one that I believe The Ringer had on, and they were down to Walter White versus Michael Scott from The Office. As somebody who just binge-watched every episode of The Office in a week, Walter White should win 100% to 0. Because I'm sorry, Michael Scott, after the 3rd or 4th season, became one of the most annoying characters I've ever seen in a TV show, period. he was funny for the first 3 or 4 seasons. By the end, I found myself fast forwarding when he was on there. And anytime you're taking the main character out of a TV show, chances are it's probably not really something you should be watching to begin with. Yeah.
Well, but you know, Kelly, this is what happens though, because you're right. Without sports, the entertainment you have is television and movies for the most part, right? So we're watching these things, and to try to make them competitive, people are putting together these pools and these brackets because we missed the NCAA tournament because that was canceled. So people are trying to do that, but at least I will tell you this: at least there's some level, even though you and I wouldn't agree with the seatings and some of the inclusion of some of these restaurants in there. And maybe it says more about the people who vote in them than actually the results. But to me, it shows a little bit of creativity. I've tuned into local television, and I'm not going to name names or anything like that, but I see people showing regular season highlights from this day last year. It's like, why? I get we all miss sports, but I don't want to see the Golden Knights versus the New Jersey Devils from April 4th in a meaningless game from 2019 where you're going through the highlights like it just happened. It's like, if you're that bored, either cede your time back to the news, all right, or do something different. And it can mean, look, I'm not an esports guy. I am not a big video game guy outside of playing some Madden here and there. But at least the simulations of the games, it gives you something to watch that's new versus rehashing old stuff. So I think people's creativity is being pushed, and you're seeing some folks just run out of ideas.
Well, it's hard for these networks. You Scott, you know firsthand, just doing content for this show every week, it gets difficult, during the off season. So now think about these major networks that are trying to fill all of their content.
Yeah.
So it's got to be difficult. Yeah. So putting on old games. It's funny that you mentioned last week. You asked, what do you guys think about watching old games? And would we actually watch old games? And I was kind of like lukewarm on it. Ever since then, I feel like I've watched every old game. Like, I watched the Game 7 Lakers Celtics last night, a few days ago, or maybe it was last week when they had the Arizona Kentucky final game. I was talking to Kelly. I was in Lexington when that game was happening. And so I flipped that on, and all of a sudden I'm like, hey, I remember where I was when that was going on. You start watching these old games. And it's funny because last week I said, I don't really watch them. All of a sudden this whole week, that's all I've been doing is watching all these old games.
Yeah, I've been using that Game Pass a lot, and just watching Raider games and watching some of the other folks in the division to kind of get to know the teams better, because usually during the season we watch games, but we're so focused on the Raiders, I didn't get enough time. So going back and watching that, and then watching some of those NFL films, documentaries, and then watching some of the old Raider games, watching the AFC championship games from the 70s and 80s, and kind of getting to know those games. Cause I've seen highlights, I've watched stories on them, but I've never watched the full game. And really, there's so many stories that you don't see when you don't watch a full game. So being able to watch that's been pretty killer.
Yeah, exactly. Even last night, the Lyle Alzado thing came on, on the NFL Network. And I was like, finally, because that's the thing is like, you're flipping through and you're seeing these games come on, but none of them are Raider games, unless it's from way back. And finally, I saw the Lyle Alzado thing coming up. I said, all right, so gave me something to look forward to last night.
Yeah, and speaking of that, we recorded a special podcast yesterday, which you can find up on our podcast feed and on YouTube, our YouTube channel as well, with Jim Duffner, who we had on the show last summer, wrote the book about Lyle Alzado, Nobody's Invincible. So we remembered Lyle on his birthday, April 3rd, with that special podcast. So yeah, you're right. And I think that's an important thing. If you're a younger Raiders fan, and again, I didn't grow up a Raiders fan, right? So for me, when I started to cover the team and needed to learn more, I watched and learned a lot about those players that might have been playing when I was actually smaller. But for younger Raider fans, if you hear about the history, you know the names, but go back and watch them play. It's really a useful and I think very cool experience for you if you're a Raiders fan.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, it's funny, Scott, because you mentioned esports. That was going to be the second part of my little thing. It's like the only thing we're missing more than sports is we're missing gambling on sports. To where the Nevada Gaming Commission is now allowing the casinos to put out odds on esports NASCAR.
Yes.
The video game NASCAR at Circa Sports downtown. And you got to think about this is just app stuff too. It's not even, over the counter stuff. They're taking about 20% of what they take on a normal NASCAR. On a normal
That's
NASCAR
incredible.
race.
But that
Now,
shows you how much
NASCAR's
people
not
miss it.
Well, I say it's not a huge marker, but the fact that you can't even go down there and bet on it, you had to have money in an app already. You can't put any more money in your app because you can't go down there to make a deposit, and they're still getting 20% of what I did on a real race on dudes playing video games. That just shows how much not only sports but gambling is missed.
Well, and
Missed
a lot of TV stations, a lot of radio stations are doing simulated seasons for their Major League Baseball teams as well, and they're broadcasting those on YouTube. That's become very popular, and if this goes on longer than we all want it to, you might start to see betting on that and football too, because when the new Madden comes out, if the season's delayed, hopefully that's not even close to being the case. All right, we're going to step aside. Thanks again, Kelly, as always, for your corner and for those provoking thoughts on restaurants. But when we come back, we're going to close out the show, and we'll talk a little bit about what's coming up on the next few weeks here on Silver and Black today on CBS Sports Radio 1140.
Bye.
Okay.
This is Silver and Black Today, live on CBS Sports Radio 1140.
Welcome back to the Silver and Black today here on CBS Sports Radio as we enter yet another week of Bunker Broadcasting. Say it fast 5 times. Bunker Broadcasting. Okay, never mind. But again, appreciate you guys being here, talking some Raider football. Amazing guests today. Spero Dedes, of course, with some great, I think, introspective thoughts on the NFL and the season and what might happen. Scott Bair, of course, Evan Groat, and W.G. Ramirez all joining us today and to talk Raider football in the wider sense, football and sports, as we roll through this thing together. And guys, it was great. The Raiders have been very active in our community for the last 2.5 years at schools. We have covered those events extensively, all three of us. And this week they announced, as I mentioned at the top of the show, $1 million to the COVID-19 fund for the commission that has been put together to help the state through this crisis. But again, it just shows that the Raiders, that not everybody does everything perfect. But, man, the Raiders have really invested in this community, and they continue to do so even in these troubling times.
Yeah, Mark Davis' commitment to this community. That's just the things we've seen him out in the community. Like you said, we've covered all these things and bringing equipment to the kids. And just to keep furthering that, Mark Davis and the Raiders just highest on the list. Much praise.
And it's, like I said, it's those little things like that. They're not even here yet, technically, but they've been doing this from the day they announced they were moving. So it's something that you shouldn't be surprised that they're doing.
No, and that's the thing too, is you see what they're doing, and I thought it was interesting because, and I'm not there's no feud. I'm not trying to create a stir here, but I will tell you that they made that donation, and 5 hours later, then the Golden Knights made the donation. The Golden Knights have been here longer and have been very active in our community, and so it's interesting to see how that domino effect happens and how people do that, and that our sports teams here, even though they're not creating revenue, they're not playing their sport or open for business, so to speak, but they are investing back in our communities, and it should be interesting. But guys, now we can kind of shift focus the next few weeks, really, on the NFL draft, and I know we'll get into that, Kelly. That is your baby. But this whole format of the draft will be interesting. What's your takeaway, though? What do you think is going to be the most significant challenge before we go here with that draft and how the format's going to be?
Well, the biggest challenge is nobody really knows what the format's going to be. I mean, they're saying they want to have the draft and everything. Same time, they don't want to change anything. Yet you've got teams that aren't sure what they're doing right now. Todd McShay was on ESPN talking about how, some teams have their IT guys in their house to make sure they've got enough bandwidth to where they can run their stuff there. Some places they've taken the whole floor of a hotel and they're going to have their guys like in different rooms and stuff like that trying to do this. I mean, the biggest problem with the whole draft in general is you got 10, 15 minutes between a pick, which sounds like it's forever when we're watching it because we just want to know the pick. But when you're trying to make moves, make trades and all this stuff, that's not a lot of time. And now it's just such an inconvenience to add on top of that. The best part about the draft or trades, I think this is just going to kill the trade market. You're not going to. I don't think you're going to see as many trades. I don't think you're going to see as many exciting trades because it's going to be so much harder to try to pull off something like this. It's one thing if you're trying to trade, like say the Raiders' 19th pick. If you're trying to go from 19 to 25, that's not that big of a deal. But if you've got somebody trying to go up to 1, to get Burrow from Cincinnati, say Miami wants to go up there, or say somebody wants to get to 2 in front of anybody else trying to get a quarterback, that's a big deal. That's a lot.
It is a big deal, and we'll have more hopefully this week, Kelly, on the format. We'll be able to chat about it next week. Chaz, Kelly, as always, guys, thanks for being here.
Yeah, great show.
No problem.
All right. And thank you all for being here. We appreciate all your support through all of this as well. Check us out, silverandblacktoday.com. Don't forget, subscribe on YouTube and subscribe to the podcast. We appreciate it. And until next time, as always, Raider Nation, may the autumn wind be at your back, but only in your backyard or front yard. And keep your distance. It's easy. Most of you don't want to be close to me anyway, so keep your distance. Anyway, enjoy yourselves. We'll talk to you real soon. This is Silver and Black Today on CBS Sports Radio 1140.
Radio.com is helping Las Vegas stay connected.
Boomer Naturals encourages everyone.
You took that way too close to the time. I think you got cut off.
Recently asked our manufacturing facility to begin making